Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Vistage Manufacturing Network webinar with Faye. My name is Scott Leeper, and I'm the Director of Member Networks at Vistage, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. As an attendee, you are in listen and view only mode with no ability to unmute or start your camera. You will, however, be asked to participate in several different ways today. You'll be able to type your questions anytime during the presentation by selecting that Q&A icon on your Zoom toolbar, and we will address those in the Q&A time. We will also have a poll and opportunities to use Slido. So have your phone close by and handy so you can scan that QR code and join in the real-time feedback. Following today's session, you will be asked to also take a short survey. We really appreciate your feedback there as it does help formulate future programs. So thank you in advance. Now, you may have already seen the Vistage decision model in your groups, past webinars, or maybe at Vistage events. The decision model is a research-based framework that categorizes the key decisions that top-performing CEOs of small to mid-sized businesses are facing. It's not the framework for how to make a decision, but it is that lens that business leaders can use to categorize what decisions they should be focused on to optimize their business and enhance their leadership. So it is through this model that here at Vistage, we help high integrity leaders make great decisions that benefit their companies, families, and communities. And today we're going to discuss key concepts within the business operations section of that model. We'll learn about decisions you might need to make when leveraging the CRM solutions to address key manufacturing challenges, implementing CRM strategies from insights and best practices, and exploring emerging trends and technologies shaping the future of CRM and manufacturing. A lot to get to, so let's get started. Our session today is with Faye, a Vistage member company, and is titled Transform Your CRM Approach, Real Stories, Real Solutions. And joining us today is Josette Weinstein, Adrian Borsta, and Ross Pedum. Josette is a senior marketing manager at Faye, who is an agile, results-driven marketing leader with over 10 years of experience in developing and executing innovative strategies. Since 2018, she has specialized in AI and automation space, driving significant revenue growth in leading groundbreaking initiatives. Adrian is VP of Strategic Services and a passionate entrepreneur and seasoned executive with over 28 years in enterprise technology. At his core, he's a people person and a problem solver who relishes meaningful engagements. His sweet spot lies in the intersection of technology, business, and human connection. And Ross is the VP of Professional Services and has successfully led support teams, managed projects, and provided technical consulting. Ross recently did a Tune-Up Tuesday on-demand content piece with us that is available on the Manufacturing Network. So if you did not catch that yet, you might want to check that out. So I know we're in really good hands with these three, so I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Great to be here. This is our agenda for today. It's going to be very jam-packed with a bunch of exciting stuff for you all. We're going to kick it off with a brief introduction as to why we're all here today, talk a little bit about CRM. And then we have three success stories and case studies that we have prepared for you guys, some names that I'm sure you've recognized already. And then, of course, we're going to end this with a live Q&A at the end. So who is Faye? Well, at our core, Faye is software. We love it. We eat it, we breathe it, we build it. Everything that we do, software is at the core. We are a #1 CRM provider for so many top CRM solutions out there. We are the #1 global sugar CRM provider out there, as well as top Salesforce, HubSpot, Freshsales. The portfolio is wide. If you've seen it, we know it. We're everything experts around CRM. We also have a ton of really great qualifications in terms of what we do. We're of course HIPAA compliant, SOC 2 compliant, and the GDPR compliant as well. So Other than CRM, we really, just cover the entire funnel from start to finish, all the way through, marketing and marketing automations, through sales and sales acceleration, all the way through, your customer and making sure that you're supporting and giving the best UI that you can from a customer success perspective. In terms of today's presentation, we're going to be using the word CRM a little loosely to encompass as an umbrella all the different types of data, with one exception, and that being accounting and financial data. That's definitely separate. But for the matters of today's presentation, when we say CRM, it kind of encompasses a large amount of sales data. Now, Faye has a large portfolio of different customers that we service. You can see some logos here on the screen that I'm sure that you recognize, all across, the different industries. And then, of course, here in the manufacturing group as well, I'm sure you recognize some of these folks. So with that being said, we're going to turn it over to our first poll question for you guys. I'll launch that poll in just a second. But while we're doing that, the question that we're asking of you is, of the following challenges, which do you feel are most critical for your organization? So we have scaling operations and managing growth, inconsistent demand forecasting, complex and lengthy sales cycles, managing multiple sales channels, and limited customer interactions. So take a chance, go through, select what is the most challenging for your organization. I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. All right. So it looks like it's a pretty even split, honestly. It looks like complex and lengthy sales cycles and limited customer interactions have taken the top spots here, with about a quarter each, a little bit higher with 27%. And then we have, as close number 2, scaling operations and managing growth, and inconsistent demand forecasting, both coming in at about 18%. And then last but not least, we have some folks, of course, struggling with managing multiple sales channels. And good news for you guys, all of these we're going to be touching on today during the presentation. So hopefully we'll be able to shed some light on different ways that you can improve this challenge. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Ross and Adrian.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Josette. So, starting with one of the first challenges, which, when I started my business, customer satisfaction, quality, competitiveness, those things are like fundamental building blocks that really need to be there right from the get-go. Otherwise, like, growth never becomes a challenge. Growth never becomes a problem, because you have to, make sure that those fundamentals are right there. And it's easy when you've got 4 people in the organization or 5 people in the organization, because you know every customer intimately, you know every employee intimately, you know your competition well. But as you start to add users and demand and complexity and compete for market share and try and grow revenue, those fundamental building blocks actually become more and more challenging to be able to maintain. And so, really in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about with regards to the scaling challenge. On to the next slide.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. I think we might have been cruel. I'm not sure if it was you could only choose one, but there's probably a few of you on that poll that would want to select different items. And there is some overlap between these as well. Just a quick note on demand forecasting, which is one of the bigger ones. I mean, demand forecasting, that is really sales forecasting. And that's what my Tune Up Tuesday was about. If you want to check out more about that, it's crucial for growth and efficiency. There's real costs involved with being overstocked or understocked based on demand. But it is something that a lot of companies do struggle with. In fact, in a poll which is mentioned on that Tune Up Tuesday of manufacturers in the UK earlier this year in 2024, I think 40% of the people that were surveyed, all manufacturers on different verticals, did not have any sales forecasting process in place. Now, I think if I asked anyone in the room today, because I know who our audience are, if it would be beneficial for you to see your sales forecast and know that it is close to accurate, everybody would say, yes, that's a great idea. That would allow me to do better resource planning, production planning. It would help with my supplier relationships and procurement, and ultimately provide a better customer satisfaction because we can deliver what people want when they expect it. But obviously, it's really important for growth as well. But you can see a lot of customers or a lot of businesses actually don't have a formal sales process. And there's good reasons for this. There's a lot of data that you need to consider in order to have an accurate sales forecast. We'll talk a little bit later about how sales forecasting might not be done particularly well and what you need to do to have good sales forecasts, considering all of the data. I'll take this one as well. Again, there is a little bit of overlap here, but one of the things that we had, I think it was second or third in the poll, is complex and lengthy sales cycles. So there is a lot of back and forth,
I
especially
think
if you're
this
acquiring.
tied for the most popular, I believe.
I think it might have been, yeah.
27%. So
Well, it's not a surprise to me, since we get to work with lots of sales leaders, as to why this is a problem. And the main reason it's a problem is because as a company, whether you're a manufacturer or you sell anything to anyone or other businesses, you're not actually in control of the sales process. The customer is in control of the sales process. So they are choosing when to share information with you, how to share that information, who you're going to be speaking with, and often there's many different people that you have to deal with. And so it's common, especially amongst manufacturers, which is acquiring a client and then building up that client is not as transaction as buying an iPod, for example, straight from the store. It takes a long time and it can get quite complex. So managing that over a long period of time and staying up to date and pushing that deal forwards is definitely very difficult. Now, we'll talk about some technologies today that help you manage that, whether you have a CRM system as is in your technology stack today or not. But definitely, this is an area where we see a lot of benefits of having a CRM, or at least helping to manage the sales funnel so that you can drive deals to closure sooner and avoid some complexities.
yeah, and of course, when you're a manufacturer, complex and lengthy sales cycles aren't just about delaying revenue, but we need that forecast to drive the demand forecasting that you talked about earlier, Ross. So, when sales cycles drag out, that might limit our visibility of what the demand is for our products. Let's look at the next slide. So managing multiple sales channels, I think this was about 19% or something. I think it got third or fourth place in our list. But one of the things that we've seen, recently with the pandemic, we've seen it, just as a general change, right from the .com boom bust and forward, where manufacturers are looking to take advantage of new ways and digital channels for getting direct. And so, where, it may have been exclusively working through distributors or dealers at one time, we have manufacturers reps who are sort of working in between and helping to build those relationships with existing channels. But then we have more direct channels such as, Amazon, eBay, if you still use eBay, Etsy, Pinterest, there's all these other marketplaces that are available online. And then we have our own direct online e-commerce, and then there's direct in-person sales. And so, it seems to be more and more expected that as a manufacturer and as a growing manufacturer that you're going to have, you're dipping your toes into every one of these potential channels. And that becomes challenging because how do you make sure that you're not, stepping on the toes of the same channels that you're already relying on? How do you give a consistent customer experience across all of these channels? And so, yeah, this becomes something that can be a little bit difficult to manage as well. And should we do it? Should we go direct? Are we biting the hand that feeds? So, this is another challenge that a lot of people are running into.
Yeah, and the final one here as well, because again, we just flashed these up before the poll, so we want to give some context to them. Limited customer insights, I think it was tied for number one. This is not a surprise to see on here either. Really, customer insights is a very wide thing. There's a good graphic on here, which is an iceberg, which actually helps to talk a little bit about the separation of where some of the data is. But it's all about data. That's hard data. That's, if you're looking at an existing customer, what have they purchased from you in the past? What is their purchase history look like? Are they purchasing more from you or less from you? But there's all this unstructured data outside of your ERP system. I'm sure everyone here has an ERP that they're running their business on, right? But there's a lot of other information that you need to consider in order to have a rounded insight on your customers, not just their buying habits, but what have they been doing? What intent have they shared with you? This is soft, unstructured data, interactions they've had with some of your sales reps, perhaps, the interactions they may have had with some marketing materials. Have they been coming to your booth at trade events, or in just environmental data as well? You might actually find that some of your customers will have increase in demand or decrease in demand based on things that are completely outside of your control. Could be the economy, it could be a particular industry that they are in, it could be that their customers or one of their large customers has gone away. And so having all of these insights and being able to make sense of the unstructured data, that's all what I'm going to call soft data, intent data, environmental data, and combine that with the ERP data, that's the hard data that you have, what are their buying habits, and then know what to do with it, because it's a big lot of data. You've probably got this in your systems today, but making sense of it is what's really difficult. Human beings are capable of taking a lot of this information and making sense of it, but we're also very subjective as human beings, and we're not very fast at it. So it becomes quite difficult to do this at scale, especially if you're an account manager who's expected to do this across a book of business of 100 customers. It's not easy to come up and know what questions you need to ask about, someone's buying this from you, they should be buying something else from you because they're complementary products. How do you know to ask that question? And how do you get to that information quickly when you're managing a large book of business? Now, this for me is one of the biggest problems for sales leaders or sales reps, because they don't get that much time in front of the customer. There was a poll, I don't actually have the name of the study that it came from, but there was a study a couple of years ago that suggested that salespeople get just 5% of the buyer's time during the buyer journey. And that's because in 2024, buyers are often doing a lot of research on their own. And so it's really important that when we get in front of our customers or prospective customers, that we're asking the right questions, and they're questions that mean something to the customer. So again, limited customer insights is a big issue for both growing our existing book of business, but also helping us close new logos and new customers.
It's exciting, Ross, because I find in the last few years, especially with the advancement of AI, we have a lot of ways where in the past it was really difficult to take that unstructured information or that soft data or anecdotal information that we gather and figure out a way to make that quantitative and make it something that's actionable. I think we've got a story coming up about one such example.
Yeah, definitely. I will just piggyback on that, and then we'll get into Peloton here in a minute. I've been doing CRM for a long time, right? I've actually been doing customer experience platforms and all of the things that you saw earlier in the slides for a long time. CRM, for the most part, over many years, has kind of come up to take over this void of trying to make sense of, or capture at least, all of this unstructured data, the interactions you have with your customers or potential customers. But it's always been a problem. Getting it in there is okay, but it's a problem for a sales rep to try and make sense of it. So you've probably heard a lot of time, Adrian just mentioned artificial intelligence is kind of their superpower, especially with generative AI, but also with machine learning, that they can make sense of that and give you some very specific things that you can read over in like 2 minutes before a phone call. And it's for the first time ever that we're doing that in a kind of 20-year career of mine. So it is actually a very exciting time. We'll talk about some of those options in a minute. Our first case study is Peloton, right? So we're going to do a couple of different case studies here. A couple of them are going to be a bit cautionary. Peloton's going to be one of these. If we could just jump to the next slide, please, Josette.
I just want to point out as well that we're going to be dealing with some large brands that people generally know, but the challenges and the problems, relate to the things we're talking about and certainly relate to companies of any size. We're picking on large brands so that we're, being nice to the SMB.
Well, Peloton is one that, even if you're not familiar with them or you want to learn more, it's actually quite easy to go and do some Googling and find out a little bit more than we can present in 5 minutes here today. But Peloton, if you don't know them, they do fitness equipment. They, especially for stationary bikes and treadmills, that was kind of their sweet spot, but they did a lot of at-home kind of equipment for working out. They had a huge opportunity when the pandemic kicked in and people had to stay at home. They weren't able to get to the gyms. And it was a massive opportunity for a company of this kind. They took advantage of that. You can see a little graphic up there in the top right, which is just like going down. That isn't how their pandemic started. Their market rate went up significantly because they had this huge spike in demand. So they ramped up their production and to meet the demand that was there. And they were just making I don't want to say hand over fist money, but they were making month over month just increases in revenue and sales. And it just continued to go in an upward direction. Now, the issue that they actually had, and we don't have the graphic here, but if you Google it, you'll find it really easily. If you actually look at their market value from the beginning of the pandemic, which we will remember, to when the pandemic kind of ended, that would have been around kind of 2022. It actually wasn't that different between the 2 points. They had this huge arc and it came back down. And the reason for that is they continued high production even as the economy started opening up. So there were lots of indicators that this was going to happen. They ramped up production, they were making money, and there are lots of studies that suggest they actually had good indicators, both from their sales teams, but also from the market and from their customers, of a reduction in orders. So they were still taking new orders, but they were declining. They were kind of curving off. And a lot of sentiment back from the market that this wasn't going to last forever. But they continue to make production decisions based on previous months' sales. And so they continued at their high production rates and ultimately ended up with a very large surplus of inventory. Now, that had a big cost involved with it. They made following decisions to try and deal with that, which was to aggressively discount their product. The end result of this, as you can see on the kind of right of this slide, their market value dropped significantly. They had to revise their fiscal outlook by 1 billion. They failed to capitalize on a huge opportunity. And it was because they did not listen to the soft data coming back about the economy opening up. They didn't listen to even some of the kind of hardish data that they were getting on a reduction in new orders coming in. They just figured this was going to keep on going, and they didn't adjust their production plans to account for it. So this is really a tale of lost opportunity. They could have capitalized on this, made adjustments looking at the sales forecast, but for some reason, either that information was ignored or it wasn't presented to them in the way that they could actually make sense of it and then adjust their production plans on the back of that info.
I'm going to suggest, and it might be unfair to them, that they might not have even been looking for it. If you compare them to like cruise lines, who were eagerly anticipating, getting back to normal operations. Certainly financially, it was in Peloton's interest to assume that things would always continue. So maybe there's happy ears involved here. There might be some unwillingness to really take a look at that. I wasn't in the room, just for the record, on any of their boardroom decisions, but so some of this is guesswork. But yeah, that's really interesting.
It does make sense. I know we'll have some questions here in a minute, but we are humans. We need to understand that we don't always make good decisions. We sometimes are influenced by what it is that we want to believe. And if we see that month over month, we're making more money, we kind of want to make sure that continues to happen. And we tend to kind of edge our bets on what we want to have happen rather than what might happen. Now, this is actually an area where technology can be better than us because they can often be a lot more objective about the information that's being received rather than subjective. I've seen this with sales forecasting before, where people want good outcomes. They want to hit their target. They want to get their bonus, and therefore they will kind of make the revenue to meet their target on a sales forecast rather than being objective and saying, I don't have enough. and then make the correction, which is how am I going to make up the gap?
Yeah, I can imagine in the executive meeting when someone puts up in their hand and says, I think we should reduce our forecast because sales are going to come down, and that's going to be the key to success. You might not be the most popular person in the room, but in hindsight, maybe that's what needed to happen. Or maybe they adjust and look at getting back and focusing on gyms instead of just private. I'm not sure. That's kind of counter to some of their model, but yeah, all good points.
So
Uh,
are there any specific strategies or tools like CRM that could have changed the outcome of this scenario? And maybe how could some of businesses apply some of those strategies?
I think,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, Adrian.
You go.
Yeah, I was just going to say there are a number of things. So I just touched on this a little bit with regards to trying to keep objective. There are a number of things that you can do. This is all about sales forecasting. I mean, there are other things going on here as well. You need to have good sales forecasting in place, and good sales forecasting is considering all of the data. Now, the kind of what we saw happen with Peloton suggested that they were relying heavily on hard data. These are previous sales. And it's a very normal thing to do because, again, you control that data, you understand it, it's real, and it makes sense to businesses, right? I mean, everyone here, I'm sure, looks in their ERP when they're trying to understand whether their business is doing well or not, right? So it's very much trusted data, but the soft data is a lot more unstructured, it's difficult to understand. And therefore, as we saw earlier in some of the slides, 40% of manufacturers surveyed earlier this year don't even do this, right? So they're kind of just chancing it. They're having a barbecue without looking at the weather forecast and hoping it's going to be okay, right? Which, not every company does that. In terms of tools, there's tools and process, right? So you do need to enable people to be comfortable enough to say, I don't think we're going to make it, right? To Adrian's point, don't put on the happy ears. But in terms of tools, there are a number of things that you can do. So now, over the last 3 to 4 years, we've had sentiment analysis, which is a way to just look at actual interactions you've had with your customers. These are emails coming in or going out, telephone transcriptions. These are things that before would have been very costly, and now they're just kind of table stakes in a lot of CRM platforms. They just do this stuff. And they can actually look at whether the sentiment on a phone call between a sales rep and a customer, existing customer or prospective customer, had good sentiment or bad sentiment, rather than somebody coming off and saying, yeah, everything's going great, when actually there were lots of suggestions that a machine would pick up, say, actually the sentiment wasn't that good. And it causes you to go back and ask some additional questions about whether you're likely to close that deal or not. Okay, so a lot of this comes down to a combination of systems that will allow you to observe the data in a different way. In a simple kind of sentiment wasn't good, right? And then make adjustments to your sales process or your sales forecast at a low level, at a deal level, not a holistic level. We're going to make this many $1,000 in revenue, but at a deal by deal level, that you should have processes around always adjusting that sales forecast and looking at it regularly and always asking what you can do to improve it and make it more accurate. Obviously, you do need to look at the sales forecasting. You do need to be doing it, right? So again, you do need a system in place that allows for that kind of thing. If you don't have that in your CRM today, I'd be interested to hear who doesn't do this today or doesn't have a system that does sales forecasting. Then just implementing any kind of CRM, kind of mid-level CRM, will have that technology available. And most of the kind of mid-level CRMs will have the ability for you to also plug in generative AI. That's kind of the newest thing over the last year, machine-led sentiment analysis, and also predictive AI, which again, we can follow up with more information on predictive AI, but that's actually looking at what deals close most likely based on different machine learning data points that they can gather. So they can, again, sort through your sales process and say, here are all of your deals. These are the ones that are most likely to close. And that big one that you think is going to get you to where you want to be, because it's, again, happy ears, maybe isn't going to close because you don't close many like that, and you don't close many in this particular sector like that. And that's machine learning taking the subjectiveness out of the picture and providing you up with some kind of more objective opinions.
I think another point there too, Ross, is like in the case of Peloton, or if you're a high volume consumer focused manufacturer, um, another type of sentiment analysis is like, what is the sentiment online? Are people eagerly anticipating getting back into the gym, or are they just loving working at home and regardless of what happens in the pandemic? So I think being brave enough to ask questions that you might not like the answer to is probably also important in terms of gauging customer sentiment, because Peloton obviously is also highly subscription model based. So having existing customer loyalty is important.
Are there any other additional proactive steps that a business can take to avoid some of the pitfalls that Peloton has seen in this case study?
Yeah, I jumped ahead last time, didn't I? There are. So as well as the technology, again, AI-driven insights, generative-driven insights, machine learning, and things of that nature, and predictive AI. They're all things, again, that exist in most mid-level CRMs for technology. But the process is make sure that you are actually doing sales forecasting and make sure that you're enabling the right people to do sales forecasting. Sales forecasting is not something that your CFO does. It's okay for them to be responsible for it, but ultimately the people doing sales forecasting are your boots on the ground sales folks who should have a system that allows them to see all of their open deals. Ideally, that includes repeat business from a customer that might be buying from you on a quarterly basis, for example, and putting some judgments on a deal by deal basis around whether that deal is going to close or not, right? That's really what you want. And then enabling them with the right tools that I mentioned earlier to make more objective decisions around what will close and what may not close. That's the only way, in my opinion, to get really good, accurate sales forecasting. But it does begin with having that process in place, enabling the people at the front line to do this. And there needs to be a little bit of carrot and stick there as well, I will point out, right? You do need to enforce that this is happening. You do need to do some change management if you're not doing this already to make sure that people understand the importance of this. And that's not too hard, in my opinion. If you're dealing with salespeople, they want to hit their goals. They want to get commission, right? So if you tell them that these tools will help them sell, help them focus their time on the deals that will close, and help them understand whether they're going to meet their goal or are off their goal and what they therefore need to do to make up their goal on a run rate through the year, then it should be an easy sell. But definitely there is a process for change management if you're not already doing this today, and you should be prepared to trust your sales reps to keep their forecasts up to date on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I'll repeat real quick. A lot of this comes down to many CEOs, C-level executives. They want to have KPIs. They want to have numbers. In the past, it's been really difficult to get to numbers based on soft intent data. Today, with AI, machine learning, we can actually include sentiment on as a key performance indicator on an executive scorecard, and I think that makes a difference in our decision making.
Yeah, before it was the reserve of human beings making that judgment call is the point, right? And you can ask 3 or 4 people, all salespeople, all doing the same job about the same deal, and they might all give you slightly different opinions about whether it's going to close or not.
Yeah, and how do we make overall decisions on that?
All right, I think it's time for us to go into our first Slido. So we want to hear from you. You just heard this really great case study. So for those of you guys who are not familiar with Slido and how it works, it's super easy. If you want to start by scanning that QR code right there at the top left corner of your screen, you can, if you're having trouble with the QR code, it should just populate right to the little box where you type in your answers. But if you have some trouble right there, if you go to slido.com and type in that number, it'll also bring you there. It's just 2 ways to get to the same place. So Slido is very cool. So using a 1-word or 2-word answer, we want to hear from you guys. So the question that we're asking is, how does this situation resonate with challenges your business is currently facing, particularly in relation to customer engagement, operations, or demand management? So now I'll just scan that QR code, type your answer, your 1 or 2 word answer, and all of the responses will pop up here on the screen. If there are 2 of the same, it'll kind of come up as a heat map where you'll be able to kind of see all the different answers. So it looks like we have our first one on here. So insight for demand management. Seems like a lot of people agree. Sentiment, yes.
Awesome. Looks like things are resonating somewhat with different people.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next case study.
All right. So Nintendo, and I'm a player in this story, not from I didn't work at Nintendo. But I was one of those folks that went out, saw, that there was something new. Like I got the PlayStation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I did a lot of pre-orders on that. I had kids growing up, and I'm still kind of a kid myself. Anyway, I invested too much money just this week on a steering wheel and shifter so that I could race video games at home, or race cars in Gran Turismo at home. Anyway, so Nintendo. At launch, if those who remember back in March 2017, there was a lot of buzz around something new that Nintendo was going to be releasing the Nintendo Switch, which doubled as actually a personal video game system, but also can be used as a console gaming system. So this was Nintendo kind of getting back into console gaming instead of from a period of time where they were popular because of the Game Boy, etc. And so this was pretty unique. But I don't know if anybody on this call was able to get their hands on a Nintendo Switch. I know I was like, on a whim, I think maybe I'll go get one. It seems like a really popular thing. And then, of course, I found out that I couldn't get one, not at the store. And so I went and looked it up online, and it's available on Facebook Marketplace. But people were selling them for $2,000, and more, and for something that I believe is about $350 retail, depending on what country you're in. And so Nintendo Switch is another cautionary tale, but it's almost the opposite. One of the things that Peloton did really well in their story was, hey, some changes are happening in the world and people are working more at home. They dug in, they got the inventory. So when the news was good, they got all over it and got inventory. In the case of Nintendo Switch, they grossly underestimated the amount of demand and launched when they didn't have enough inventory to actually cater to it. So what's the result of having that challenge? Well, let's just say that if I have to go online onto Facebook Marketplace and find other people who are profiteering off of the situation, it's probably a good indication, particularly if those conditions stick around for weeks and months, that you really missed the boat. An interesting note is that I still don't have a Nintendo Switch because once the initial craze got by, I kind of was like, well, I don't really need that. So I don't know how many other people there were in my boat where they could have actually sold some initially, but ultimately it wasn't just delayed, but there's a lot of lost sales as a result of just not being able to be aware or tapped in to the level of demand that's there.
Yeah,
So
so it's another one of I was going to say it's missed opportunity again, isn't it? Is the point?
Massive opportunity. It's a swing the other way. In this case, maybe kudos. They didn't just go happy ears. Oh, it's demand's going to be amazing and we're going to overstock. But it went the other way, and they were like, oh, we'll get prepared for this nice, reasonable launch. And so they definitely missed a lot of opportunity. So an interesting one here, and I'm going to move through this pretty quick. If we look at Nintendo, I think one of the things here, if I'm looking at what data was not captured or was not paid attention to, probably, are they engaging with their potential customers? They already have a lot of, users and Nintendo profiles. Are they engaging with them? Are they gauging, how many pre-orders do we have? How early did they start taking pre-orders? Did that factor in? Are they looking at social media and finding out, hey, how quickly do we get 1 million likes if we post something on Twitter or X as it's called now, about the upcoming launch? That's all intent data and sentiment data, which back in 2017 was actually still pretty challenging for us to turn into quantifiable information, just like we talked about with the Peloton example. And I would suggest that a lot of that information could have really fed in to help them. Again, we can take that data, make it quantitative, and put it into a KPI so an executive can make decisions about, hey, is this the right time to launch if we don't have sufficient supply yet?
Let's jump
Are
in
there
some
any
questions, I think, Chisette,
Yeah.
because otherwise we'll run out of time.
read my mind right there. Are there any specific strategies or tools that could have changed the outcome of this scenario?
Yeah, Adrian just touched on a couple. I just wanted to point out this actually is a bit of a tricky one to do in many respects. We talked about the kind of like waning demand with existing customers or getting new customers on the last one. This is a brand new product launch, which I'm sure a number of people on this call probably do have new products. This wasn't the first time that Nintendo had launched a product, as you probably know, right? They've been around doing that for a long time. But it was a different and slightly more unique product, as Adrian said, in that it was able to do some different things. So again, it doesn't mean just because you have never sold this yet, there isn't information there. And Adrian, you mentioned, the intent data that could come from marketing, it's quantifiable. Pre-orders would have been a big part of this as well, right? They probably should have begun by kind of forecasting pre-orders and then seeing what they were actually getting and then adjusting their forecast based on that and their production strategies. So yes, this is still something that, again, it's Nintendo Switch. We're going after some big brands today, but you can look this up, which is the nice thing, and learn a little bit more about what really happened. And I'm sure that these things can impact what you guys are doing, even if you don't have all of this information today. You're not just selling into existing accounts and trying to grow that book of business. So it's also applicable for new product launches.
Are there any proactive steps that a business could take to avoid some of these pitfalls that Nintendo has seen?
Yeah, I think just putting some of those strategies in place. It's hard to go back in time and look at 2017, but I do think we are blessed today with enough technology that we can at least be armed with the right information. Of course, it's important that every organization focus on a culture that, does their own SWOT analysis and prepares for, looking at their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and assessing risks, and doesn't just close their ears to anything they don't want to hear. So having a culture that is aggressive about, wanting the truth is definitely an important core value to have to be able to take advantage. But we do have better technology today to be able to arm us with actual numbers instead of just anecdotes.
Yeah, and the other thing would be, don't just set it and forget it. I don't believe for a second that a company the size of Nintendo didn't have a plan, right? Or some kind of forecast as to what they were going to sell. The point is, they didn't adjust it. So even if they were receiving this information, and some information I'm sure they were getting, even though this was, seemingly not that long ago, but that's actually nearly a decade ago now.
Yeah, 7 years.
You need to be adjusting your sales forecast. This all goes back to looking at the numbers regularly, always asking whether we need to adjust those numbers. And that is a big part of making sure that you get this opportunity and close on it. It wasn't just about not the things that they didn't sell, right? They didn't lose an opportunity because Adrian didn't get one in the store that day. They lost a lot of potential customers that would have been brand customers on their platform for many years to come because they had money to spend. They wanted to buy something for their kids. They couldn't get it. And what do? They went and bought a PlayStation or something else instead. And then, they would be kind of in on that brand and pulled into that other brand. And it's much harder to win that kind of customer back.
All right, so I think it is time for our next Slido. All right, just like the first time, it works exactly the same way. Scan the QR code and let's hear from you. If this was your organization, how would you approach demand forecasting differently than Nintendo did? Love to hear from you guys in a short one or two or a few. You can see that it fits on the screen. Short, concise answers. You would have adjusted, of course.
Yeah. Would you have delayed launch if you knew you didn't have enough supply?
So someone says they wouldn't have done anything any differently. That's curious. I'm curious as to what you would have done. Right size inventory based on KPI measurements. Yeah, definitely. Listening to the data kind of ties back into that one as well. Everything needs to be data driven, all of our decisions that we're doing today. All right, so for the sake of time, I'm going to close the poll and then we're going to get on to our third case study.
All right, and I'll run through this one fairly quickly. So this is less of a cautionary tale. Warby Parker is started off as an online retailer for eyewear back in 2010. And one of the things that they did, I think it was about 2013, is they started expanding into bricks and mortar shops. And so now we get into the whole, having competing channels potentially. How did they handle it? Rather than just working in silos and creating this whole other different silo and different data source and different systems, et cetera, and forcing their online retailers to compete with the bricks and mortar, they implemented a system, a master customer record, making sure that the customer experience was actually consistent across both bricks and mortar and online. So you could go online, use the virtual try-on, put the glasses on, do they look good, get it queued up, then go into the store and actually pick them up. Or you could do the inverse and go into the store, try on the glasses, in real life and order them. But either way, you got a consistent customer experience across both channels. But in order to do that, you have to be able to act as Warby Parker needed to have a relationship with their customers. So they needed to have the customer needed to feel like if they interacted online, whatever information they provided online is now available when they walk into the store, and vice versa. So full data sharing and understanding of the customer needed to be consistent across any of their marketing messaging, across their online messaging, across their online experience, and across their in-store experience. And essentially what happened as a result of this, they successfully scaled from an online retailer to a national brand with physical stores, maintained high customer satisfaction and loyalty, achieved efficient operations, and a strong market position. So this is more of a success story, an example of what actually can be done and how we can manage multiple channels and know our customer and have both a direct customer relationship as well as being able to leverage partners effectively.
Are there any specific strategies or tools that could have changed the outcome of the scenario? I know it was a great scenario, but there's always room for improvement to make things better.
Well, I mean, in this case, I'm going to reverse this a little bit and say, well, what did they do and what did they avoid? So if they had not had a CRM system in place, and if they had not looked at the entire life cycle of their customer and observed it and planned it across different channels with a centralized master data record, then they would have ended up in a situation where the bricks and mortar stores probably would have struggled because they would have been placed in competition with online. They might have ended up in pricing wars and actually led to reducing their own profit margins because they've got two channels competing with each other, and that's just unnecessary. So, but by having a core master record and a consistent customer experience across all modes of communication, they were able to advance forward and achieve what they did.
Are there any proactive steps a business could take to replicate the success that we've seen in this case study?
Yeah, I mean, I think start with Start with the customer journey. Understand your customer's journey right from the beginning to end. So rather than, as a manufacturer, sometimes, traditionally anyway, we're often one step removed from the customer because maybe we're working through dealers, distributors, and other means. Take time to know your customer, understand that customer journey, and sort of, make sure you're the Geppetto or the puppeteer, and that you're crafting and designing the right experience and using all of these channels as resources to achieve the right customer journey, so that at the end of the day, when they think about your brand, they feel the way you want them to feel about that brand.
All right. Well, this leads us into our key takeaways.
Yeah, we covered a few things, obviously on the different use cases. And again, I'd encourage you, if you're interested in any of those, just go and Google them. That's why we chose those ones specifically, because there's a lot of content out there if you want to do some more digging. Demand forecasting is very close to my heart. I work with a lot of sales organizations, sales leaders. It is a really hard thing to do because it requires people to make some changes, and there are lots of tools nowadays, as I said before. Capturing the data is something that CRMs have grown up to do over the last 20 to 30 years, but more recently, there is technology there that can basically take that unstructured data, or indeed the hard data that exists in your ERP, and analyze that and give you new opportunities. So, is this customer buying eggs from us, but they're not buying the bacon? These are complementary products. There are AI-led systems out there today that will allow you to see that and say, hey, when you get on the phone with a customer, in the 5% of their time that you get, why don't you ask that question? Or why is this customer buying only this amount from us year over year, but a customer that is very similar in size and industry is purchasing much more from us? So what questions should I be asking when I get on the phone with them? So demand forecasting is definitely a problem, but it's one that has become a lot easier to solve for if you implement some of the newer technologies. I'd be more than happy to speak with any of you if you're interested about what those technologies are and how you could implement them either in your existing systems or what systems would be useful for you. Adrian, I don't want to keep talking. Do you want to pick out anything particular on here?
Yeah, no, I think, there's no, as we've gone through these stories today and we've asked some, kind of questions, obviously we're talking about the benefits of a CRM, but I want to point out that this isn't about necessarily, like, we have the benefit of hindsight as we make decisions moving forward in our business. So this isn't necessarily to call out that these organizations did something wrong. But given the tools and everything that we have at our disposal now, the question is, can we improve, and can we take these ideas back into our businesses and as manufacturers and find ways to improve? And I think definitely the answer is yes. As we look at the new set of tools and that are available to us and the lessons that we've learned, the answer is definitely yes.
Perfect.
So to borrow from Jerry Springer, this is our final thought. Your data is one of your most valuable assets, especially in the front office. Knowing how to leverage this data is crucial to staying competitive. So while your competitors are already harnessing this information to their advantage, you don't need to start from scratch. So avoid the pitfalls of trial and error by learning from others who have successfully navigated similar challenges. There's no need to sink your ship in order to learn how to pilot it. Just use proven strategies and tools to guide your business to success.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful we can get to one or two questions, at least one. I will just add to that. I mentioned that 40% of manufacturers surveyed early this year don't do demand forecasting. That means that 60% do. There are lots of companies out there that are doing this today. Some of them are probably your competitors, right? Or other companies that are just in similar markets that could kind of invade into yours in some respects. The other thing is, when they actually did that survey, which was done by the manufacturer earlier this year, they went on to ask, why aren't people doing this? If that's the case, it's about inaccurate data. 59%, so 60% of the people polled said we don't do it because the data's too inaccurate. And again, it's hard to manage all that soft data. 30% went on to say that the technology tools are too expensive. These are things that have changed. And we often see on webinars that I attend or are a part of, people often ask, well, how do I get hold of that new technology? How do I implement it? And this is really what the statement's about, right? You don't have to go and learn all these things yourselves. It's been with us for a number of years now, so I would recommend reaching out to companies like Faye, who do this kind of thing with companies regularly, to make sure that you can get the value from any of these things faster and not waste money on things that are perhaps not going to make a difference within your business.
All right, so it looks like we're at the Q&A portion. I know we're coming up on time, but we did have some questions come in before the presentation. Let's start with that.
Have you got the first one there, Gisette?
Yep. Sorry about that. I'm switching screens here. Yes, the first one that has come through was we currently use ACT for historical reasons, a very old CRM system.
Mhm.
They're interested in knowing if it's transformative.
So
Great.
I think that's asking by transformative is, can we scale and can we keep on moving with ACT? So I'm going to answer the question in that way. So ACT, probably, I think one of the first CRM systems I ever used, I used ACT, and I used Goldmine back in the late 90s. And there's a lot of organizations that those were on-premise systems with databases that are traditionally kind of hard to connect to and hard to pull data out of. And so as a result, people have ended up sort of using those systems for a very long time. ACT has recently tried to move more towards a cloud-based infrastructure. They're trying to do some things that are better. Depending on the size of the organization and the industry that you're in, generally I would suggest that there are other tools that we work with today that have a lot more that is there out of the box, ready to go for manufacturing. And furthermore, we actually have a lot of experience successfully migrating data out of ACT, even, no matter how old that database is. A lot of them have, Fox Pro or, old Microsoft databases. We can usually get that data out in a usable way so that, the tool isn't holding you back.
Yeah, again, generally, there are lots of CRM solutions out there. We talk about CRM, but there are CRMs for very transactional businesses that are selling things at a high rate. That's rarely the case for manufacturers unless you are selling B2C and you have hot cookies, right? But it really does depend on your use case, what your customer base looks like. Do you have a small number of customers that spend a lot with you? You're going to look for a different type of CRM. They're all labeled CRM. But I would encourage you guys to get on the phone with a company like ours or a similar one and just ask the right questions about what would be a good system that's going to scale with me. First and foremost, it's about being able to connect or record those customer interactions. That's the soft data. Do it in a passive way wherever possible, so people are not just doing data entry, and then providing the tools that will allow your sales reps to make the right choices and spend their time in the right spots. On that point, I think there's another survey that I read that 43 hours of time every month is spent by sales reps looking for information. And I think that, again, is harping back to the fact that there is a lot of information that a lot of you may be gathering, whether it's in ACT or something else, but it isn't always front and center. And that is very difficult to manage when you're looking across a big book of business.
Okay, we had one more question come in. I know we got to be quick because we're at time, but how much of a CRM should be automated versus manual? For example, should a customer touch points be manual activity, or does automation work?
I'm big in favor of using the system to remind people to do what people do best. So automate reminders to the salespeople, but if you want to have a high touch, you want you've invested in salespeople, you want them building a relationship, use automation to remind them and prompt them to be the best version of themselves, not to automate the direct communication. I think automated communication should be a little reminder to the customer of something that's already been discussed between people. It might change if you're in a high volume consumer facing business as opposed to business to business.
Great. Josette, Adrian, Ross, thank you so much. We are at time, but appreciate you sharing your time with us and your thought leadership. Thank you to all of our participants for joining the Vistage Manufacturing Network webinar. Again, please complete the survey that pops right up after we finish. If you have additional questions or would like to connect with our presenters, you can also indicate that there in the survey. Now, if you have not done so already and are a Vistage member, please take a moment to join the Vistage Manufacturing Network or any of our 32 online communities listed at vistage.com/networks. We look forward to your ongoing participation in all of our network activities. Thank you again. Stay safe out there and make a difference by being kind.